Thank you, Christina. Sweet sassy. I of course started with that. That was my first comment out of my mouth when I hit record was thank you, Christina, for telling me to hit record. I'm so grateful. Okay, so just quick for those that watch this on the YouTubes, we are talking about social connection and community within peoples, within the church, how we come to know ourselves in community, and how we need to understand ourselves to be vulnerable and also present to others and present for community to happen. That was a quick summary, right? Did pretty good on that one. Well, if only it would go so. So I want you guys to write down how, like on a scale of 1 to 10, or just tell me, why not? But for those of you that are listening to this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how connected do you feel to others? And you can define others in any way. This might be the people that live under your roof. This might be your friends, or it might be all the others. It could be anything, sweet friends. And so I invite you to this conversation today to think about this. And I want you to think about why you gave it the number. I always say from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest level of connection, but you could do 1 being high. It's made up anyway, right? And so I want you to start thinking about how you feel about your connections. Because as you know, I'm a fan of the tear process, right? Our thoughts create our emotions, which create our actions, which create our results. And I think that we need to get clear about how we think and feel about our connections. Are there people that you would like to feel more connected to? Perhaps it's in your church community and you're like, I want to feel more connected to the people around me. And what has this done since the pandemic? What has this done to our church lives and our church communities and even our friend groups when we're not able to be present? Has this changed? I know Allison is teaching kids not physically present with them. So how are you connecting? Allison, what has gone through your process of how you connect with kids?
Honestly, like I've basically relied on the parents for the most part to connect with kids because I can't really go to every child's house, and I just hope that, through the parents I can, I rely on them to, get the material to the children. And then also, I just give them everything they need to make it like as easy as possible. And then, celebrating their birthdays this year has been really big. And I think just letting the kids know that we're still thinking of them and
Yes.
we remember them. So, we do the Facebook posts and, we get to show a picture and share, and everybody gets to, say, hey, hooray, it's your birthday. But then I also send them like a handwritten card for their birthday too, saying, hey, I miss you, like we'll get together again. So I don't know. I know when I was younger, I loved getting mail. I don't know if kids still do right now, but like, yeah. So, I mean, just letting them know that we're still thinking of them and I miss them.
Beautiful.
I mean, when we do Zoom once a month, and like basically I just tell them I love them like 500 times and just tell them I miss them. And like we spend a lot of time just like, asking how school was on Zoom.
Yes.
But we do a little bit of a lesson, but for the most part it's connection.
Yes, that's it. But it's the chaos of Zoom with kids, right? Yes.
Yeah, they're pretty good though. They're getting really good at it.
Oh my gosh, they've all changed. So we've all adapted. How many of us thought we'd be using Zoom like this all the time? Not I, ever. I love it. So, but it is really how we think and how we feel and how we are perceived and known. You guys know I run a group coaching program, and I mean, some of the people are from here, but a lot of people are not Kansas based, and I've never met them before in real life. But I would do anything for these people. I see them, I know them, I feel known by them. It's what I think and what I feel. I always say there are people that we've never met, but we feel like we know really well and we feel connected to. So I think about those kids on the other side of Allison's I love yous, and they feel like we create that by what we think and what we feel about these sweet little kids. I love that so much that you've held the space for that. So we're going to talk about this because we've talked about The Soul of Shame by Dr. Kurt Thompson. It's so good. And look what book I just got in the mail today. So do you know Dr. Bill and Christy Gaultier? They run the Soul Shepherding Institute. Have you guys heard of this? I heard about it from Pastor Jeff, I think. And they have a podcast. Now, they are two psychologists who do soul training for ministers or people who work for the church. But their stuff is so approachable and so good. I love their emails. If anybody, I just highly recommend them. But they talk about your next steps to greater intimacy with God. And so they are saying that to be in relationship with others, in connection, in community, we have to create an awareness of ourselves and our thoughts and our emotions and that insight, but then we also have to be connected. And they talk about how to love others, how we love difficult people. Do you love my face? It automatically is like, oh, right? Like, there are difficult people. How do we forgive people? How do we love them when they're difficult, right? And my favorite was do your best to live as everybody's friend. And they talk about that. It's from Romans 12:18, right? How do we live in community and love others when it's very difficult, when it's very hard? And you guys know, I love to tell you the research behind why connection and community matters, right? It's good for all sorts of physical health benefits. We know that community or social connection is what the literature calls it, improves physical health and emotional and mental health, right? And one study showed, but a giant study, that lack of social connection is a greater detriment to health than obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure, which I find crazy. That it is that connection that matters to us more and has a greater impact on our physical health than smoking? Like, is anybody else as perplexed by that? Or does this make you are too? Okay. Christina says she is. I was so surprised by that. But I mean, this is what we get. And I know this, Julie Hayes not here, it's Abigail, but welcome Julie / maybe Abigail, right? This is, and we know that positive connections that we had inside and outside of our families build resilience, right? And our resiliency skills, and those attachments matter to us. So we understand that process and why it matters. And we know that there's just study after study on why and how lonely all of us feel pre-pandemic, right? And what has the pandemic done to our sense of connectedness? And we see mental health rates of mental health challenges just skyrocketing. skyrocketing. That's the word I was looking for. Maybe skyrocketing could be a new word, right? We'll just add that to our new words that we make up. So what has been your experience? We are looking today at the story you were telling yourself about your sense of connection. And some of us have gone through life experiences that have almost, well, I would say mostly all of us, that have challenged our sense of safety as it relates to human connection and human relationships. And that's why I'm so taken by that Soul of Shame by Dr. Kurt Thompson, because he talks so much about like when our relationship is severed with someone, when we don't feel safe in connection with someone, how do we make sense of our stories? How do we make sense of what we are telling ourselves about what commitment and connection and community means? Now, I will say this, the good news about the research on around the health benefits and the emotional health benefits of social connection is this. Social connection is really about your subjective feeling of connection than your actual number of friends. So it's what we think and feel about it. It's not like if there's reciprocity from another person, it's what we are thinking and what we are feeling. You could have 1,000 friends, right? And still feel low in connection. We've all heard the expression loneliness in a crowd, right? I lived in New York City and it was the loneliest I have ever felt. And yet you could go nowhere and be surrounded by people all around you, right? So it is our thoughts and our emotions about it, right? And I think about this because the research shows that it's our subjective feelings that matter most. And I want to say this, that it is not being merely in the presence of others, right? It's the reciprocity, being heard and being seen. And as long as you feel connected, you get the same benefits. And we know that community is a big deal to the Christian life, to our spiritual life. And we even see, like, we have a triune being. God is God, the Holy Spirit, and I mean, that's community that we see. And God desires us to participate in the community and know the perfect and joyous love. There's like 1 Corinthians 12:27, which I cannot remember. Does anybody remember? Let me find it. Now you are the body of Christ and individual members of it. And the truth is, oh, this is my own take on it. The truth is we need each other, right? We just know this. But if we look at the ways we need each other in the Bible and the ways that we relate to each other in the Bible, it can get confusing, right? It can get, there's so much in there, but we have to tease it apart. And Kurt Thompson says this, let me find it. It was so good. That the most important part is that we bring our own ideas to this. When we're reading the Bible, we take all the attachments, all the stories we're telling ourselves, and all our shame narratives, and we are putting that on the way we read the Bible, even the way we interpret Genesis. Remember that they were naked and they felt no shame, right? Why would they say that? Why would they need to say, and they felt no shame? What? It's because shame is so woven into our narrative, but it's how we put that 1000%. Oh, sweet Abigail, feel free to speak out, even if we can't see your sweet little face. And Abigail said 100%, not 1000%, but I love that.
1000% works also. And I'm so sorry that I'm late. I have no idea what day it is and you don't want to see me right now, but I love you and I'm here.
I love it. Please, CSE, I don't think it seems like not a Friday. Can we just acknowledge that? I'm so confused. There was the president. It's all a blur. It's all blurring together. When you're too cold, your brain doesn't work, right? That's what I'm going to go with. So I think that our understanding of God and how we're making God mean, or how we're experiencing God is part of our narrative, or how we're experiencing others is part of our narrative of our life experience and our life stories. So we have to get super clear about what we think about God and about the shame story and about Genesis. And when we understand that we are loved by God regardless, when we understand that God loves others regardless, we oftentimes get into the work of deciding that we are God so we need to judge others, and we don't intentionally do it. But in our response to judge, we are saying we know better than God. I know this is out there. What do you think about this? I think oftentimes that when we are going for connection, the hardest piece is to see someone and to be with someone, even when they're struggling and sinning and doing all the things. And we, in our rush to judgment, we disconnect from that love that we need to experience in all aspects. So I wonder when we understand that God is calling us to rely and trust and depend on each other. God gave us each other to walk alongside, encourage, to raise up. The writer in Hebrews says, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and do good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day drawing near. That's Hebrews 10:24 to 25. And the Bible gives us more verses like, but behold, I love that I say behold in such, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. And if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. We are one, many, and we are one body in Christ and individual members of the other. But how do we live in a community of believers? How do we live in community with others when there is so much shame and so much blame? This week on the Lives of Courage podcast, I talk about shame, because it's so it's such a narrative that is ever present in our lives. And I believe that we all have the shame blame loop, that we feel shame, the emotion of shame. And so we want to release ourselves from that emotion. So we blame others, we blame ourselves, we blame the situation, or my personal favorite, which I love to participate in, and I'm deeply ashamed of it, but I blame God. I'm like, this is God's fault this has happened. Where is God? Is he off the clock? Right. I mean, I don't really, well, that kind of thing. So we feel all the shame and we need that release valve to be like, it's okay. I've got to get out of feeling this way. When we are not clear about the thoughts and emotions that are driving that action, we're going to do anything to release that valve. What is your pattern of blame? This is like opening, I'm like, tell me, how do you deal with the shame in your life? Because I think there is power in saying, like, this is how I do it. Mine is God or others. Oh, and myself. So I guess maybe my pattern is all the above. What does that look like for you? Feel free to talk about it if you want. If not, you could type it in the comments and I could say an anonymous person. Do you like that? So, because they can't see the comments when they listen to this on the YouTubes or watch it on the YouTubes. I think about this, that when we are afraid of, I know this for my own life, that when I do not feel loved, when I feel disconnected, I engage and almost, I engage in feelings of shame. When I feel like I've done something that is wrong or that is sinful, I decide, don't worry, I will shame myself. I've got this, God. You don't need to do anything. I'll do it. I'll just feel bad. Like before anything can happen. Now, I will say this. I sent Abigail a book, The Other Half of Church. What Abigail, was that the name of it? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's The Other Half of Church.
And they talk about how shame should be used within the church. And that's where I was like, shut down. Abigail, how did your brain do with that?
I have mixed feelings about it. Well, the biggest problem I have with the book is the need for conformity to one worldview, like as if there is one Christian worldview and this is what we're all after, which I think is a really gross representation of their former ideas, which are that God absolutely cares about and designed your brain so that you could like be fully human. And that like discipleship is owning your humanity and then integrating your right and left brain so you can experience God fully. And then like in that later part, to me, the worst, saddest part was like, and now be conformed to the doctrine of the church. I think that those were my main issues.
Because it went so well. I sent it to her when we were on the joy chapter, Hesed, love in the community. And then I was like, oh my gosh, Abigail, I'm so sorry. Like it fell apart.
Honestly, there are hardly any discipleship books that don't have big problems. And I would say like all theology is flawed, right? Because we're not God. But
Yes.
But at the same time, I think you're right. I think that they make a major turn and it's not a helpful one.
It was a bait and switch, sweet friends. It was a real.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, most books in theology are that way because we feel very uncomfortable with the idea that people could actually interpret God for themselves.
That's it. Yes. Well, and I think that in the church, we use unintentionally, we use shame to get people to conform.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think that is a tool. And so it's perpetuated in our experience of understanding our community, us in community. That's why the church is so scary, was so scary to me.
And like that shows up, I think, in different forms in different kinds of churches, right? So like in a church that's more emotive, then it's the emotional experience that you're always chasing. So again, so it may not be shame-based, but it's like you have to feel these feelings all the time, right? So it's like a different kind of spiritual formation toward chasing experiences. It's kind of like an addiction to feeling good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that all of it, and so like at Chapel Hill, if I could like point the finger at us, one of the things we do really good is talk about, God's love and grace. And we don't always talk about as much about character formation and how that actually happens and holding people accountable and like those sorts of things, which are always also very necessary in community, right? We tend toward like the happy message of the gospel and not the hard. So pointing at myself here.
Amen. This is it. Well, and Kurt Thompson said, this was his quote, "Be careful not to project our psychological interpretations where it is not warranted into any story in which we are not direct participants, not least of that, the scripture." And I think that we project our stories of attachment or insecure attachment onto those stories in the Bible. Don't you think, Abigail, or anybody else? And we're all like, oh, that's where God is judging, and that's where God is calling me. I also want to say this, that I think of shame as like a personal attendant. Have you thought about this? I think shame is like, how may I help you today? Except not like in a nice way. Shame's like, here I am, ever present. And when you want to be like, live in intimacy or being seen by others, shame's like, are you sure you really want that? Do you remember when you were rejected? Except my shame's not this nice. Like that primitive voice in my brain's not like, are you sure? Mine's like, do you remember the time when you were rejected because you told a truth about yourself and that your youth minister or pastor said that was wrong, or I don't know, fill in any story. Or people that have differing opinions about what is right and what is wrong. We could take like anything in the church that is divisive. We have that personal shame attendant that's always like, see, I told you. Yes. I told you this would happen. I'm just here to help. Like shame pretends to be helpful. Don't worry. I'll keep you safe in community. I'll keep you safe. And when we walk around with that person yip-yapping to us, trying to keep us safe, that personal attendant, it gets old and heavy. And so we say, forget it. I just choose to not, I opt out of connection and community. I'm done trying because it's not safe. What do we do when that shame story gets so loud? And how do we reconnect? And how do we embody all of us so that we can be in the presence of others and be fully who we are? Fully the vulnerable. Guys, I've been practicing that word right and left so that I could say it. I mean, for how many years did I struggle with that word? So I was like, well, that's really hard not to be able to say that word when in the world of psychology, because that's our favorite word, right? Shame and vulnerability. And thank you to Brene Brown for her deep work in this area and calling attention to the pain and the disconnection that results from living with that shame story all the time. That shame attendant who's like, hey, sit back down, don't volunteer, don't reach out, because someone's going to tell you, I don't want to be in community with you. Because here's the deal. Other people are walking through life with their own stories. Other people are learning and growing. And other people are walking around with mismanaged brains and with disconnection from God, disconnection from themselves, and disconnection from others. And when they live with that, the same stories we live with, it is hard for them to also live in community. We often want to turn it to what is wrong with us. But everybody is struggling. You know, my favorite thing and Abigail's favorite thing, apparently, after she learned the tear process, we love to run the tear process on other people, to be like, oh, I see what's happening. I see. But I also think it allows us the tools that we need for authentic connection. And that is the awareness of the mind of others. You can't experience compassion or like mindsight of the other when you don't understand that they could be experiencing all of these other things. Their shame attendant could be more aggressive and louder than yours. But sometimes we forget that. And if you'll excuse me for one moment, I'm going to remind my child to let in the dogs because they are barking outside. And can we just get a hello? Look at my dress today. Right? Like that's clearly talking. That's the most important part of this. I just wanted to get, can someone let the dogs in, please? Hi, let the dogs in. Thank you. I'm on a call. Maybe I should have muted it before I went.
This is our favorite thing about you, Jess.
Say that again.
We just have to say that you are so professional these days. It's kind of bothering me. So I'm glad you did that.
Good. I was like, at least you guys know my greatest fear is for me to yell at my children and then be like, oh, see, she doesn't have it to, you know, like how on the Zoom they come in and I'm like, stop it. That's my shame. That's my shame attendant is like, see, you still have troubles. You still yell at your children. I mean, loudly talk. We are a family of loud talkers. I love to write down what your shame attendant tells you on a daily basis. I challenge everybody to do that for a day. Mine is busy. And she's wearing like an 80s power suit and has like a clipboard and is always like writing it down like, oh, you really screwed up on that one. So it's my favorite. And thank you for saying my dress. Okay, so I believe that there are, how many tools? I don't know, I make it up. Christina, bless her sweet little heart, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tools, I think, for true social connection and community. Are there 5? There are probably 20. But I think these are really important tools that we need. First is self-care. Of course I would say this, right? If we do not love ourselves, if we do not care for ourselves, if we do not understand that we are in control of that shame attendant, it's hard to reach out. It's hard to ask for help. When you feel good, you reach out. When you have thoughts like, I am worthy enough of community, you reach out. So I believe that's number one. Number two is mindsight, which is the capacity to see or imagine the mind of oneself or another, enabling us what? To understand their behavior. This is what we were talking about when you can run the tear process for others. It is mentalizing, theory of mind, my favorite, mind reading, because I'm so good at that. Don't worry. If anybody wants a mind reader, just call me. Not in the psychic sense, but in the I can read someone's mind and it's always wrong. 100% it's always wrong. I'm like, I know what they're doing. They don't even know what they're doing. They are driven. I think we're all driven by this need to avoid our feelings, avoid feeling bad. So we will do things and not even know it. And people do this and they're deeply, like, they're just frantic to get a release from their bad feelings. I'm sure no one on this call has ever done that except me. But that's what we do. And we often have a habitual release, a habitual reaction. Mine is to blame others, but it's again, when you know that, you can see it quicker. You have that mindsight to be like, I see what my mind is doing. Another tool for connection, I believe, is compassion. The ability to feel with another, to be sympathetic, to be tenderhearted, acts of service for others to feel connected. But I do want to say this, and Abigail had asked me this. I think that compassion is necessary, but we can only do that if we feel self-compassion. And that our acts of compassion, of like, let me feel what the other is feeling. I love that I'm just doing air quotes. Like that had nothing to do with feel what the other is doing. Just randomly using air quotes here. So don't take that as feel what the other, let's just take that out. If we are to feel, the only thing we are responsible for are our own thoughts and emotions and actions. So we can understand where someone is at, but we cannot cause them to act. I think oftentimes that when we are trying to connect with someone, it can be to alleviate their pain so that we alleviate our own pain. I want to make this person feel better so I don't have to feel bad that they're feeling bad. And newsflash, I don't believe that's what compassion is. But this is controversial. But we have to first have self-compassion. And then secondly, no, not secondly, fourthly, I think we need empathy, right? We have to understand the internal experience of the other person. This comes back also to mindsight, but the projection of one's consciousness into the feelings of another and that sympathetic understanding. And this is a complex process, I think, which involves the mental capacity to imagine that other mind. And empathy, yes, depends on mindsight, but it's really mediated by the right hemisphere that we've been talking about, and also the prefrontal regions of the brain.
Jess, I also just wanted to make that connection with race, because it's so easy to see this in light of racism, and specifically the inability to imagine another person's story. And I think your connection with that and the lack of love or self-acceptance, or even like acceptance of self-error, is such an important piece of that. And like James Baldwin, if you know him as an author, he talks constantly about the racism thrives in an environment where there's no love and like for self. And so like, it's really interesting, like to think about that and think about especially if we start to think about where we have no room for error in our own lives, it's almost impossible to have empathy for someone else's situation. I think that's so right. That's why the person that we both love and is in our life and is most like us and drives us crazy, right? We have no compassion for them or empathy for them. And right. Okay. I'll stop talking now.
No, you're not. Because I think that when we are deeply afraid of our own story, this is what you were saying, and this is thanks to Freud, but we're not going to really talk about Freud here. When we cannot accept our own story, we can't accept the stories of, like we're like, if that touches our story, we're like, no, done. Like this is without realizing it. And I think that when we make others the other, that is the tool that we use to separate ourselves, to say that I'm so different. And when in reality, we're just afraid of ourselves. We're afraid of loving ourselves. And if we love ourselves so hard that we know that we don't have to perform to be loved, we are loved now, right? We're back to that. Then no one else has to do anything to perform, do anything, be anything, perform any way to be loved. They don't have to make X amount of money. They don't have to be X color. They don't have to, right, do something or apply for thousands of jobs. Like, we can love others if we love ourselves, right? And again, we're back to that do unto others as you would have do unto yourself. Well, if you treat yourself like angry, not niceness, that was a really great way of saying that, right? You're going to do that to others without realizing. You're going to take that internal anger and shame externally because no one wants to hold that inside. Okay, and then finally, I believe that insight is the final tool. Not the final tool, is the one of the tools that I want to talk about for social connection and really community. And that is the power of penetrating observation and discernment leading to knowledge. And when we use this and pair this with the notion or the tool of personal introspection, insight implies deep knowledge of ourselves, right? Deep knowledge of God and who we are in Christ. And insight itself doesn't imply empathy or compassion towards others. But when we accept ourselves, here we go, as who we are, people filled with both weaknesses and strengths, it's easier to accept the flaws we find in others, and acceptance makes it easier to tolerate differences. And this allows for greater cooperation and community and connection. But here's the deal. If we don't have insight of our own flaws, and if we are not willing to be accepting of ourselves, we can never accept the other, truly. That's why I think one of the most powerful therapeutic tools that the world has created, is acceptance and commitment therapy. But I believe that comes from living our belief that God made us, God made our brains, we are children of God. That is true acceptance. And so we are doing this work to be aware, to be known, to be seen. Always. And that doesn't always require an other. But we want to be known and seen. But here's the deal. We can be known and seen by God. Remember our being known meditation that I think is changing our experience, that is communion, that is community, that is connection with God. And that is changing fundamentally how we see ourselves and how we see others. Because everyone is reflected in that image. Everyone on this that we come into contact with is a child of God. The book, How God Changes the Brain, which Christina on Wednesday helped me remember, the friend of Andrew Newberg, who is Marky Mark, although it's not. It is Mark Waldman, but I was just calling him Andrew Newberg or Nyberg's friend. That's all I could remember. And Christina, thank heavens, remembers things. And Marky Mark and him developed this. It wasn't Marky Mark. Mark Wahlberg. No, that Mark Waldman, developed a meditation intervention that they studied over and over again. And it is called Compassionate Conversations. Has anybody tried this or heard of this or done this? So I, of course, made my husband do it. And I've seen training on this. Yes, she has. Okay. And it is, well, they say that you need to do it with someone you don't know. Because if you're doing it with someone you know, you're the mirror, I'm like, you know them, you have a story with them. So do it with someone you don't know. And you touch knees or hands. Well, obvs. This is pre-corona, right? We could still do this with our masks on, but like how do we see and smile and feel known? This is so fascinating. I didn't fully think this through. But they believe, we know that a tool for communication is also, for connection is communication. And we have to become aware of the neural processes of communication, face and voice recognition, language processing, memory recall, speech coordination, evaluation, strategic planning, activation of neural circuitry. It's all the things that are required for communication and how we engage in others in the process of communication. So they teach us in How God Changes Your Brain how to do that. Maybe when the corona is over, we will lead people in that meditation. Right, Abigail? Doesn't that sound like a good time? We could even do it.
We could 100% do that, and we could do it even now if you want to. We do sometimes do in-person things, so we can break through.
And we can touch knees, which is what they say to do, and not hands.
I also just found out that we have face shields at Chapel Hill, so we could do double mask face shield.
Oh, nice. Get ready. Hold on to your hats. We might be being known in deep and like, so you have to meditate together, then you have to yawn together.
When you do this, the thing that struck me most was touching somebody else. Like it wasn't at all vulnerable for me to be touched, but to touch someone else on their knees, that's how we did it also. I was like, I don't know if this is okay. You know?
I agree. But you know how I touch random strange. I'm like, Mom, I'll touch before the plexiglass, I touch my barista, my Target gal. I just like hold them. And I can do that. But if asked to do it, I'm sorry, I'm screaming at this point. If asked to do it, I thought I was going to have a paper bag to breathe into because I was like, this is so awkward. So we'll have to do this. But anywho, what it's teaching you with the yawning and you yawn and you start with a compliment, right? Do you guys know this? They found this, these sweet little, you have to hear, right? 5 compliments before you can listen non-defensively to a criticism. He and he recommend that you get in the habit of practicing confirmations or compliments. How many of us do this? I'm like, don't do that. This is wrong. Pick this up. I'm talking about how I interact with my children. Sweet sassy, don't do that. I mean, like, it's nonstop. Or even my husband, I like, do I give 5 compliments, confirmations to someone, to everyone? Something to think about. And also in this process, and Abigail, probably I could not abide by this, but it is very important to talk for 30 seconds or less. We know our brain is only capable of consciously holding a handful of concepts, approximately 4 to 7 chunks of information in its working memory. That's why you, like, people, you're like, oh, what, you know, da 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 da, and they only remember the last part. Adults, think about our children who have even weaker prefrontal cortexes. 30 seconds or less. I just talked for an hour. Remember on Wednesday, I was like, I've got to remember this and only talk in 30-second chunks. Obviously, that went down really well because from Wednesday to Friday, I forgot it. Or I forgot it intentionally. Have you tried this? How do you talk? Like, when you talk to people and need them to hear you, do you talk very specifically? And just say 30 seconds or less information. I need you to hear me. I am going to the store. I couldn't think of anything. You guys know I don't do well on the fly when I have to come up with an example. I need you to hear me. You are a good and dear person and a great cook. That's always my go-to for my husband. You're a great cook. What? And I need you to pick up the trash off the floor. This is taught in conflict management too. Yeah. But the deep work is owning your experience and understanding that what they say can be met and seen, but it is your experience that you own. No one can make you think or feel any way. And so the more insight we bring into our communication process, we are transformed. So social connection and communication really is an outgrowth of that personal connection. And one cannot exist without the other. So I invite you this week, your homework is to look at those connections and to ask yourself, what do I need to be thinking and feeling? What do I need to be fostering? It is not about action here. It is about action, but it's not. It is our thoughts and our emotions, and those will drive how we connect with the other. Okay, guys, sweet friends, I went over a little bit by 1 minute. I did forget to, thanks to our dear Christina, who helped me remember to hit the record button, or we would. But please let me know if you have any. I meant to leave so much room for talking. I do not know how I did this, but I'm not going to feel shame. My shame attendant is not going to pipe up about this, right? She's not going to say, you did it again. You didn't leave room for talking. I'll just learn and grow for next week. Get ready. Week 7, there's going to be so much talking by you guys. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Are there any questions? I normally get a lot. You guys know that people come to me about questions about connection. What if I can't find someone to connect with? What if my connection has been severed by the other? And it's not my doing. What if I feel disconnected from my kids? That was the conversation. What if they are a prickly teenager or a young adult who is not in a place to connect with me? It goes back to how we think and how we feel. And knowing that they are on their own journey and that we cannot control that. And that is the hardest work, I think, in this life, is that others are doing their own things. And that we are called to love, but not to control. Even though we have to raise them. And they should listen to us. Your children are not your own. They are the souls and daughters of life longing for itself. Who is that? He's a Persian poet. Khalil Gibran. That's it. Okay. Love you all. Happy Friday, now that we are convinced. And here in Kansas, oh yeah, we're all Kansas-based. It's such a great thing because we're going to have the balmiest. I walked outside without a coat at 20. I was like, this is so warm. Who knew 20 degrees would be warm? But when it's been -2, 20 feels great. Okay. Hugs to you all. I'm praying for each of you. Love you all. And also.
Thanks. Can you say hi? They heard you.
Hi. Oh my gosh, life is so good. Oh my, does
Say
she
bye.
have a little bird on her sweater? What is that?
No, it's just a little flower.
A flower. Oh, I love it. That is so, well, you guys have fun, okay?
You cut her hair?
Did she?
Yeah, I mean, we had a haircut a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh.
We like to keep it short on her to, accentuate her chubby cheeks while they're still there.
Oh, so cute.
She's gonna outgrow those this year. I bet you they leave,
Oh,
Her
no.
face is gonna grow out this next year. So we're gonna just keep on keeping the cheeks.
I
right now.
love that. Oh,
You never know. I kept my cheeks my entire life.
fingers
Sorry, I
crossed.
forgot. I unmuted to say goodbye, and then she came up, so I didn't mean to
Too
distract everybody.
sweet. I love. Okay, bye guys.
Okay,
I
bye.
love you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Abigail.
I am the worst. I'm so sorry.
No, you are not.